Welcome to Parenting Teens with Dr. Cam, a podcast about navigating adolescence without losing our minds. Each week, I guide you around the teenage landmines with practical tips, simple solutions, and words of encouragement. I'm your host, Dr. Cam. Let's get on with the show. Welcome, parents. The American Academy of Pediatrics recently declared adolescent mental health a national emergency as rates of depression, anxiety, self-harm, and suicidal thoughts continue to skyrocket. The pandemic brought this serious issue to the forefront, but this uptick started years before COVID arrived on the scene. Sadly, and too often, the parents of these teens are the last to learn about their child's mental health struggles, and sometimes too late to take action. So today, I'm joined by Elliot Kallen, the co-founder and president of A Brighter Day, a nonprofit organization dedicated to preventing suicide by helping teens manage their depression and stress. Elliot is going to teach us what warning signs to look for and what we can do to protect our teens from the #1 preventable cause of teen death. Welcome, Elliot. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Dr. Cam.
Absolutely. Now let's just start with your backstory. What inspired you to start helping and preventing teen suicide?
Great. Well, it's a sad story, as many of these charities began with sad stories. So 7 years ago, my 19-year-old sophomore at the University of Montana had jumped in front of a truck or walked in front of a truck at about 1 a.m, sober, no pills, nothing inside of him, and was missing in action for an entire day. We were trying to find him. He was already dead. And at 6:30 at night, Federal Express showed up with a 6-page suicide note. And in that suicide note, which rambled, the first paragraph, the most important paragraph, Dr. Cam, said, "Mom and Dad, I've been thinking about this for a long time. I never would have told you how I felt. I never would have asked for your help. And I never would have taken your help." And in that process of going up to Montana and claiming his body, and you can imagine as a parent, it's awful. It's awful. And you go through all the stages of death that they talk about. You don't miss any of them. And the human body does not do well with a 100,000-pound truck hitting it at 60 miles an hour. And you have to identify the body. And it's a terrible story. But I read that paragraph all the way up. And I think I read it 20 times on the way home with his body under the plane, bringing him back for burial. And I realized, I turned to Jake's mom and I said, we have to do something to stop other families from having this happen to them. We have to do something. We're going to be victims of this our entire lives. What can we do to fix this? And we came up with the idea of a Brighter Day charity. And that would be a charity that would provide resources for teens and their parents on stress and depression, especially for those teens that aren't sharing anything with their parents. Because as a parent, if your teen comes up to you and says, "Mom and Dad, I'm thinking of hurting myself. I am hurting myself. I'm doing things that are self-destructive," you're going to take action. Yeah. We as American parents are trying to be, for the most part, very good parents all the time. And I think that's worldwide. Everybody wants to be a good parent. But what if you don't know? What if you're like Jake's mom and myself, and we just think, well, he's a teenage boy. He's 19. He grunts, he groans. He doesn't share as much as we'd like him to share, but he'll get over it one day, as boys do. And that, of course, that opportunity never happened. So we've now, fast forward 6 years later, Dr. Cam, we now have thousands of articles that we've written and resources that we've created, a teen survival toolbox for kids, a parent survival toolbox on our website. It's very exciting what we're doing. We are original content writers. We're prolific writers. We write 2 to 4 articles a month. We're on national wires all over the country with what we're putting out. And then we've just created a partnership with 741-741. So any teen and any parent in any state in the United States can type the word Brighter, BRIGHTER, to 741-741, and they will get 24/7 help for up to 40 minutes at a time.
That's fantastic and so desperately needed.
And it's free. It doesn't make up for something like that you do with the live counseling and the Zoom counseling, which is just so important. but it's immediate and it's tactical. And for the parents that just put their hands up and say, I don't know what to do at this very moment, that gives them somebody to talk to right now.
Yeah, and I think that's important to reiterate that that's for parents too, because I know parents, as soon as you hear or see anything like that, you go into panic mode, because the last thing, I mean, it's the worst nightmare for something to happen to your child, and I'm so very sorry that happened to you.
Thank you.
I'm thankful you're taking that and moving it forward to help a lot of parents and children too.
Thank you. We're making a difference, and the goal of the charity is to impact parents and teens so we could stop teen suicide. I've got letters on my desk from parents and from teens that say, thank you for saving my teen's life or my life. But we know just from a number standpoint, because in the world of social media, we can measure things. Last year, we had about 19,000 people that went to our website and downloaded materials. Last month, we had over 15,000.
Wow.
So it's really having an impact and touching lives. We just want to touch lives and touch families. We can't stop teen suicide. We're not on the front lines. So like yourself, where you're actually meeting with families and doing that great job with a personal conversation needs to happen. But at least we can get some resources in people's hands that they can read or they can learn on a video, and they can say, I can get some help now. I'm ready.
Yeah. And a lot of it is the education piece. And I really wanted to talk to you about that today, because I think what really is difficult for parents is we have this belief and these understanding of what teens go through, right? So we're like, okay, teens have attitudes, teens are going to hide in their room. So it's very hard for us to discern what is, quote, I'm putting in air quotes for people on podcasts, typical teen behavior, and what is really concerning teen behavior. And especially, like you said, most teens are really good at hiding their pain from their parents.
Yep.
So what do we look for as parents?
So look for pattern. Let's start with pattern behaviors. Your child sleeps X number of hours a night. You know it. You're a parent. Okay. When that changes, like my son, I noticed my son at the very end of his life during Christmas break, he was awake from 12 to 3 in the morning. We had to go over there, knock on his door and say, hey, come on, time to go to bed. And he was fooling around on his cell phone. He was doing nothing worthwhile. He was just, and so many of our teens, they do nothing on their cell phones. They just look. So look for pattern behaviors. Look for eating disorders. Those are good ones. Look for they're withdrawing from their classes. They're withdrawing from their friends. We noticed, and his friends told me after he died, that he was withdrawing from them. His friends, one of his friends interviewed me, called me up after his death and said, I'm writing a paper on this, and would you mind me writing a paper about Jake? And I said, not at all. He said, can I interview you? And I said, of course. And he interviewed me, and it was much more of an apology from him than it was an interview. And he said, I did not see that he was withdrawing from us. I didn't see that he was sometimes asleep when we were awake and awake when we were asleep. I didn't notice these things. And so it's just changed. And I'm sorry that this is going on. But look for changes in your teen. Look for what's going on in class. Are they withdrawing from a particular class? Are they withdrawing from a subject? Are they giving up? Are they putting their hands up in the air and say, I can't do this math. I give up. Why bother going to college? I'm not really college material. And unfortunately, we live in a world where it's all about college material. It's not about trade school. And that's another subject for another time. Why don't we do a better job there? But it is true that what if you're not college material? Are you a failure? What if you're not, what if you've got parents, and I'm a parent, and the world of parents, I don't want to say I'm a helicopter parent because I'm not sure I like that phrase, but I'm certainly a parent that was insistent at coming out of a good school myself, and their mom coming out of Stanford, you need to go to a good school. Now, we never said top 50 or top 20 or Ivy League, but my middle one was, I took him Ivy League shopping. So yes, we put implicit stress and pressure on our teens because we knew that getting a pedigree education could open up doors that they will need in the future. What if your child's not that child? What if your child would be just great going to a 2-year school to grow up. I should have gone in the Army or the Marines and grown up before I went to Rutgers, but I didn't do that. But I could have used it.
Yeah.
In retrospect, I would have been, I was just at 18, an idiot of an 18-year-old and not mature. And so like so many 18-year-olds, they're just not mature enough to go to school. And, you know,
Not ready.
so it's important that you understand what's going on from the perspective of your teen. And I want to say something that you're going to ask me the question, like, what can parents do?
Yeah.
And I know you're going to do that. If I could just jump the gun on that.
Go for it.
I want to give you now, we've done a lot of research on this.
Okay.
And it's not complicated. The answer isn't complicated. You know, you don't need a college degree to be a better parent.
Right.
What you need to be is a better listener. And so for parents, I want to tell you that this cell phone is the enemy of your teen. And I know it because every parent looking at this is saying, oh my goodness, it's their best friend. They can't get away with it. The parents can't get away with it. It might as well be an umbilical cord to all of us. But the cell phone creates a highlight reel of everybody else's life but theirs.
Yeah.
Your friends are on TikTok and Snapchat, and you and I are on Facebook, and we're all on Instagram, and there are all these amazing reels. And I remember my kids came home at one point, they said, you know, Dad, are we the only ones in Lafayette, California that don't go to Hawaii for winter break? Because that's how it seemed.
Yeah.
You're either going to Lake Tahoe to go skiing, and you're going to Hawaii. And then my kids felt like victims, like, oh my goodness. So I took them up to Tahoe to go skiing a few times during break, but we didn't get a townhouse or a condo, and I don't have a house in Tahoe. But they felt a little bit like victims. Woe is me. All my friends are have a better life than me. So I always tell parents, this is what you need to do as a very first course of action. Make dinner a cell phone free environment, including for yourself. Yeah. No texting, no calls from grandma, no talking to grandma during dinner, no texting your friends for the kids, no going over homework. It's a conversation, good old fashioned conversation that maybe is a throwback to before there were phones and all those distractions, you know, to just talk. Yeah. Just have a conversation. Find out what your teen's favorite class is and why. Who's your teen's favorite teacher and why? Who are your teen's favorite friends and why? What are your friends' favorite classes? Because they may talk about their friends in a third-party way when they're really talking about themselves.
Right.
And you don't realize that. So there's so much that you can learn by just taking 3 or 4 nights a week. And I get it. Everybody's busy. Sports, sidetracking, leadership. I get all these things. You've got to make dinners, cell phone-free dinners. It doesn't matter if you're eating at Wendy's because you're in a hurry, or you're eating at home, something that you cooked, or you've got 2 working parents and you're using stove first lasagna because it's the only thing they have time to make. That doesn't matter. The food is secondary. The time is paramount. And that's what parents need to do.
Yeah. And Elliot, I want to jump into, because I know the time thing is really big, and our schedules are so jam-packed with all the stuff we want to give our kids so that they succeed, right? We're making sure they've got school. Not only do they have school, they've got tutors to make sure they're doing well at school, right? They've got extracurricular activities, a lot of them, to make sure that they look good for their college application so they can get in school. And what I want to reiterate that you just said is, of all of these things that we're so busy doing, it is at the sacrifice of the one thing you just mentioned that is the most important thing to set them up to succeed, and is time with you. Yes. And that dinner and that downtime. And we are so busy piling on all the other stuff that we're missing the one most important thing. And I keep, with COVID, things slowed down and people started doing that. And I was like, oh, I hope they hold on to this. The second things opened up, they went right back to the crazy busy schedule. And I'm like, you're missing that really, really important thing.
You're right. You can never make up the time it took to be a great parent.
Yeah.
I mean, we are busier than ever. And 2 working parents, the kids are involved. Now with the end of SATs, you've got to build resumes up for your teen. So it's 3 pages long, and they're in leadership class, and they're in camp, and they're in band, and they're in sports, and they're in unorganized sport. They're everywhere. So downtime is considered bad time, but downtime at dinner is really, really important. Great time, not good time, but great time.
Yeah.
And I didn't understand. I had a mother from Europe, and she was a survivor of Auschwitz, and she wanted to be a good mom, and she was a very good mom. And I didn't understand why she was so annoying all the time, asking me about my friends and my classes. I didn't understand it. I found it as a teenager just annoying. My brother, who was much more studious than I was, he loved it. They talked about every single class, and they did math together, and they did all that stuff. My English was my mother's third language, and she used to laugh, saying, how come I know more English than my idiot, teenagers? But she was concerned that her children were in a good place mentally, that we wouldn't do something that was horrible. And when we had a family friend that took her own life as a 17-year-old, there were lots of conversations about what's going on in your life. How are your friends? When Long Island, when I was growing up, had 6 or so kids that hung themselves, and suddenly the word copycat suicide, the phrase copycat suicide came out for the first time, conversations in school were like, why did they do that? I don't understand why you would do that. And then my mom was concerned about, do you have any friends that are feeling bad? So these for you as a parent, and I know you work with family counseling all the time, the parents with great communication, caring communication, can really get to the problem, the root, the cause of what's going on in their teen's life, and intercept a life-changing missile that could be coming at them.
Yeah, and I think what's really important too is, at the beginning you were saying, like, here's the things to look for, right? And not sleeping enough and changing patterns. And I think what we tend to do is we try to address the behavior. So we'll take the phone away, or we'll try to get them, to change sleeping patterns, but what you just said, and I want to highlight, is it's not about that behavior, it's about why that behavior exists. It's getting to the root of it. And that's when we get to where their state of mental health is. Because changing the behavior is not going to change their mental health.
I do want to add one thing we have found in our experience, and I'm sure everybody has different experience, is that if you're depending on the schools and the counselors at the school to do this for you, you're going to be wholly disappointed. Yeah. They're not trained. They've got 1,600, 1,200 kids, 2,500 kids in that school. They're busy. They've got tests. The counselor's job is to kind of get you through the school year without incident. They're not to cure you. They're not to solve your problems. They're there occasionally. There are some kids that do a better job with counselors, and some parents that reach out, and you can get some information, but don't depend on schools to solve this. The school's job is to get you through to May, not to change your child's life.
Yeah, I think that's really important. Although counselors want to help, they don't have the bandwidth nor the training. You're absolutely right. And I think the other thing I find really interesting, and I think this is true for the schools, but also adults, is we often think that if our kids are getting good grades, we use that as a measure of mental health. And I want to exert very strongly that that is not the case. In fact, a lot of kids who are struggling with their mental health are the ones getting the A's, which is part of the reason why they're struggling with their mental health, is that they feel so much pressure to do well. And so we cannot gauge how they're doing inside based on what they're showing in their accomplishments on the outside.
Yep. My son who took his life was on the dean's list.
Yeah.
Even I think when I congratulated him, hey, you made dean's list, he looked at me like, really? Yeah. Like he had such low expectations of his own ability but you're right. Kids that are trying to get 4.0s. There's a really good story I heard. I was driving one day to work, and they had an interview on, and this is just before the days of podcasting. So it was somebody like yourself on live radio, and they were talking about your teens' high school experience. They had done this national survey of teens that were now freshmen and sophomores in college of what they thought of their high school experience. And they went to the top 50 schools, the kids that were kind of driven to get better grades. And they were surprised that over 70% of teens there in these top 50 schools said they had a less than favorable high school experience. So I immediately called my twin up at Washington University in St. Louis, a high performance school, It's like they're so proud that they're like top 2 or 3 in giving homework out. So what one of the measurements they have. How's that for a silly standard? And I said to him, I said, Cody, I just heard this report and it said, preponderance of teens thought they had a miserable experience. And he didn't even blink an eye. He said, Dad, my high school experience blanked. I don't want to say the word. It was horrible. I will never do that to my children. I said, well, you were pretty hard on yourself. Do you think we put too much pressure on you? He said, no, I put it on myself. I admit that I'm hard on myself, and he was a high school valedictorian. He said, but I wanted to have a perfect score. I wanted to get the perfect SAT or close to it. I wanted to get in that top school and be a top person in my field when I get into that field. There was a lot of motivation in there to do that. But he was the high school hockey goalie. He was on the lacrosse team. At one point, he was on cross country. He was in a number of clubs. He was president of this club and that club. Great resume, exactly what you want as a parent for your child, and miserable.
Yeah, I think what's interesting, because I hear this from my teen clients a lot, pretty much all of them are really struggling with school. And it's not that they're struggling with the academics part of it. It's just the fact that there's so much pressure on them right now to achieve all this for some vague reason in the future. And so we are focusing so much on making sure they're set up for the future that they're not enjoying their lives now. And so they're living this miserable existence in their mind, and they don't have perspective to say this can change. So a lot of these kids do feel hopeless because they're like, well, if my life is miserable right now when I'm young, how is that ever going to change? Because my whole life is about trying to do stuff now just so I can maybe hopefully be happy in the future. And I think we really want to focus on how do we help our kids feel happy and thrive right today, right now, not someday down the future.
Well, you're right. And you're really on the right track. I like to look at it in a kind of like a box. I think of, it's got 6 walls, top and bottom here. And the box opens up and is brighter for the happy kid because there's something to look at. But for Jake, who's not with us, the walls got darker and darker. And suddenly they became very black. And so yesterday was horrible. Today's even worse. Tomorrow's good. Why bother?
Yes.
And I think that's what happens.
So before you go, 2 things. First of all, how can people find you, find your website, find all these amazing resources you have?
Very, very simple. Just go to www.abrighterday.info. It's all free. Everything on there is free. We'd love to have you. Come join us.
Excellent. And I've got all the links I will have in the show notes as well. And I know I checked out your guides for parents and for teens. They're great. Really good stuff. So I've linked to those as well. And finally, what is kind of the one big takeaway you want parents to have from this episode about helping their kids and making sure that we're doing everything we can to prevent them from going into this dark place?
Well, I think if I were to pick one thing, Dr. Cam, I would say ask great questions. Be a prober. I know it's annoying. I found my mother annoying. I was probably annoying for my kids. You'll be thankful when you get good answers.
Yeah, I love that. And keep asking. If they're not answering, then ask some new ones. Maybe take a break.
Yep.
I will say too, if you start doing this and you haven't been, a lot of kids are hesitant at first because they're worried it's a trap. So I'm just throwing that out there. They may be hesitant to answer you because they're like, ooh, what are they trying to dig for that I'm going to get in trouble for? So I think a lot of it is once you've asked the question, spend a lot of time actually listening and not judging their answers.
Absolutely. You're right.
And then they'll answer again.
A non-judgmental dinner is a great dinner.
Yeah, the non-judgmental is so important to add to that, though. That's key to it. If it's judgmental, forget it. It defeats the whole purpose.
Yep.
So, Elliot, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it and your time.
Oh, thanks for having me on. You're doing a great job.
Oh, thank you. And parents, thank you for taking time out of your busy day to spend with us. I do really appreciate you as well. If you want to learn more about how to help your teens thrive, you can grab my top 10 secrets for raising teens at askdrcam.com/parentingtips. Until next time, have a peaceful, positive, calm day.
And that's a wrap. Thanks for joining me today on Parenting Teens with Dr. Cam. Make sure to visit my website, www.askdrcam.com, where you can subscribe to the show in iTunes, Stitcher, or via RSS, so you'll never miss a show again. While you're at it, if you found value in this episode, I'd appreciate a rating on iTunes, and hey, why not share it with a friend too? Be sure to tune in to my next episode. And remember, parenting teens may not be easy, but with my help, it can be a whole lot easier than this.